question of who's in control is a philosophical question. Like, do we as human beings have freedom of choice? Can we choose what we do, or is it predetermined? Um, if so, who predetermines it? Is it predetermined by the spirits? Is it predetermined by the stars? Is it predetermined by God? Who or do we really have free choice? And who's really in control of our lives? When we lived in Haiti, there was an old man that lived in the community there. This was in 1990, and he was then in his 80s, and he was a single man, but he had seen phenomenal changes in his life. Like he would have been born, 1910 or before, and in that area of Haiti, things had changed tremendously, even from 1960 to 1990. But he remembered when the main road that went out through the South Peninsula, that when we lived there in 1990 was a paved road and lots of traffic. He remembered when that was just a little donkey trail, and it took a long time to get supplies in there. And people basically lived off of what they raised in their gardens and very seldom went out for anything. Um, so he was an interesting person to talk to because he had a perspective on that community that covered decades, and a phenomenal amount of change that happened in his lifetime. He was also kind of a dreamy person. He was a person who thought a lot, and he had a bit of a stutter, which uh, made him added to how cute he was. And his name was Gracian, but everybody called him T-Bass, and I don't know why. I don't know where he got the name T-Bass, but everybody knew him as T-Bass. And T-Bass was a local figure. Everybody knew him, and he was a very nice old man. And he came to the church where we were part of. And I had a Bible study at the church, and I don't know what the subject was that I was teaching, but it probably doesn't matter because when Tibas asked a question, it may or may not have been related to what the Bible study was about because was um, he was a dreamer. He was a philosophical thinker, and his thoughts didn't always follow the train of what everybody else was thinking about at the moment. So at that time, I had an interpreter that was helping me with the Bible study because my Haitian Creole wasn't all that good at the time, and so he would come and do the interpreting for me, and so I was teaching, and then we had a question time, and Tibas had a question, and his question was a rather long question. And the longer his question went, the more people started laughing, and people were just laughing and laughing. But he just continued on and asked his question. Oh, my interpreter was just he was just slapping his knees and laughing, and I was asking him what's the question because I didn't really understand what Tibas was saying. And he just said, "Ah, it's nothing. Don't worry. It's nothing. Don't worry. It's not a real question." And I was like, "Yeah, but I want to know what he's saying." And so finally, my interpreter could stop laughing enough, and he said, "Well, what he's saying is he wants to know who's really in control. Like he notices when he walks out of his house in the morning, his shadow is there. When he goes to pick food out of his garden, his shadow is there picking food out of the garden." And he went through a whole series of things that he does in a day's time. When he's eating, his shadow is eating. And he notices that whatever he's doing, his shadow is doing. So he wants to know, is is he determining what his shadow is doing, or is his shadow determining what he's doing? And it was a perfect question. And so we talked about who's really in control, and that our shadow follows us. We're not following our shadow. So we control our shadow. But the question of whether we are in control of our own lives or not is a very profound question and is one that deserves thinking. What's the role of the supernatural world in our lives? And how much are we in control of our own lives? And how much is controlled by things outside of ourselves? Of course, we as Christians believe that we are directed by the Holy Spirit and that God, by His Spirit, gives us direction. But there are variations even in Christian thought about how much God is in control and how much free choice we have as human beings. So Chibas had a very profound question.